you're enjoying this content, hit that subscribe button. Join us. New from All Caps Comics, Cyberfrog, Unforgettable Tales on Indiegogo. 2 classic comics presented in color for the first time, plus a Blacklight Salamandroid poster. Back it today, links in the description below. Well, what do you know? It's Comic Artist Pro Secrets, and my name is, well, heck, I'll just admit it. I'm Ethan Van Sciver, 27-year veteran of this crumbling, collapsing, limping comic book industry. World's most charming, elegant, eloquent, and yet humble man. Great big Star Wars fan, trusted member of the media. Unlike these clowns here at Bleeding Cool. It's nice to be with you on this Friday, first day of C2E2. What is C2E2? Is it some fake Disney Star Wars astromech droid? No, absolutely not. It is actually the 3rd largest convention in the United States for comic books. There's San Diego Comic Book Convention, San Diego Comic-Con, that's located in San Diego, California. And then there's NYCC, New York Comic-Con, located in New York at the Javits Center. And then there's this, Chicago, C2E2. Now, it's a pretty big convention. It's usually pretty well run, but shocked to hear on Gail Simone's new YouTube channel that they are not flying her in as they would normally, but they're bringing her and her husband in on some kind of a circus train. And I just find that very odd. It's a 2-day train trip. It just seems like the lost time would be more valuable than whatever the difference is in plane fare. But who knows what's going on over there. I just hope they're put in a nice hotel and they don't have to stay with the convention promoter's brother-in-law or something like that, sleeping on the couch. I don't know how badly the comic book industry is actually doing right now, if it actually is that bad. But it doesn't look good, guys. It doesn't look good. Now, here's Rich Johnson over at Bleeding Cool to gaslight you that everything's fine. Everything is just fine. And he's heard what I'm saying. Rich Johnson's like, I heard what people like Ethan Van Sciver are saying on YouTube, but listen, I heard all that stuff before, and it didn't happen then, so why would it happen now? Why would it happen now? All those poor Pompeians who were talking about, well, that volcano might erupt at some point. It didn't happen before, so why would it happen? Why would it happen now? These are good questions and a good attitude to take about any incoming crisis or any problems that might soon arise. And here's this article, Gossip on the Eve of C2E2. What now for DC Comics? What now for Jim Lee? And what now, Joe Quesada? Now that you bragged at New York City Comic-Con last October, now that the next week you lost your job, you were demoted by Kevin Feige, what now, Joe Quesada? What now indeed? Well, Rich actually drops a little bit of tea here. He spills a little tea about Joe Quesada and a possible future at DC Comics, which to me would be pretty amusing. All right, so it says there's been a lot of noise. That's me. Of late, that apparently Warner's Warner/AT&T is going to close the comics publishing side of DC Comics if the planned 5G publishing plan is not a success. That is true. That is what most people are saying within the comic book industry to each other. But the kids, I think we don't want to get the kids upset. So there are, amongst the freelancers, we're telling them a different story. And Rich is going to tell them that story too. This is an awful lot of pretty funny gaslighting. Rich says, I heard all this before. Why, I heard that if these events right here weren't successful, that Warner Brothers was going to close down DC Publishing. If DC's New Age of Heroes, if Rebirth wasn't, what are you kidding me? What are you nuts? Before Watchmen, New 52, and Blackest Night. Let me tell you something. Blackest Night was never in doubt. It was obviously the biggest event that DC Comics had on their roster. I helped create it, of course. It came from a tiny little idea, a seed, a germ of an idea that I had that kept me awake one night, and boom, me and Jeff Johns, we built Blackest Night together, and of course, it was a massive success. Nobody was talking at that point about closing down DC Comics Publishing. Indeed, things were looking pretty good. And he's saying, look, I've heard all this before. And it didn't happen then. Well, what's the difference? What's the difference between then and now, Rich Johnson? Then DC Comics wasn't merging. DC Time Warner wasn't merging with a soulless, debt-ridden corporation like AT&T, whose shareholders were screaming for blood and to cut the fat. And I will tell you something, that for a company that wants to get into streaming services because streaming is the future, because television ad revenue is no longer coming in like it used to, there's a lot of fat in those offices at DC Comics. A lot of fat. All right, a lot of soy, too. For one reason or another, Warner Brothers has often been close to closing DC Comics because it costs too much for decades. And again, he goes on here to spell out the argument that DC Comics gives to AT&T about why they deserve to exist. This is their existential argument. Look, we don't cost that much. And frankly, look, if we give you one good idea for like a Batman or Superman idea, that pays for everything else. And what if we do? What if we give you that idea? It's an amazing Batman or Superman idea, and then you got a movie and all this stuff. Look at all of our garbage is covered, right? I mean, now AT&T is going to basically say, look, we don't believe you anymore, because that argument worked when there weren't tons and tons of movies and television and animation that were coming out of Hollywood by Hollywood writers. That are basically doing your jobs better than you're doing them. We don't need Gail Simone anymore. We don't need these people anymore. We don't need them. And DC Comics is responding in a way that is also illuminating, and that Rich Johnson, even though he points it out here on his own site every single day, seems to have forgotten. DC Comics is responding by bringing in a lot of new hires from Hollywood and from other industries in entertainment other than comics, presumably to take over the jobs that were once held by comic book professionals, traditional professionals, writers, and make it more to AT&T's liking. Okay, it's a stupid response. Frankly, it's a stupid response to what AT&T is saying to them. Well, Hollywood already does it better, so why don't we just cut out the middleman, which is the comic book publishing side of things, the comic book publishing division that isn't making any money anyway. Oh yeah, we'll just go and we'll hire these expensive talents from Hollywood to come write our worthless pamphlets. No, that's not quite what Daddy was asking for. Not at all. All right, so here he goes on to speculate. Rich Johnson speculates about who might come in to kind of take over and staunch the bleeding. He brings up Ike Perlmutter, who is, of course, a well-known Trump supporter and somebody who basically runs Marvel Comics. And he points out that it's Republicans. This is the way Rich writes. He points out that it's generally right-wingers who have a zeal to cut the fat. And so that's the enemy, SJWs. The enemy is Trump supporters. When you lose your job, that's what he's signaling here. He's signaling to them that if you do lose your jobs in comics, it's because of Trump supporters and Republicans, etc. That's what this pretty much, this paragraph kind of is signaling. It's dog whistling. And he's suggesting that maybe John Nee might come in and form another partnership with Jim Lee to sort of take over some of Dan DiDio, who was fired last Friday, some of his former duties. That's not a bad idea. He is suggesting that, characters that I have already pointed out, Hank Canals would be interesting. Ben Abernathy, great guy. Absolutely love Ben Abernathy. He could come in. Bob Harris, somebody who certainly has the ability to do Dan DiDio's job. Maybe not to publish. This is what Bleeding Cool always does. Their website is such garbage that it reloads all the time so that it automatically gives you another view. So they get another view. What a trashy garbage heap of a website. Nevertheless, let's see. So, Bob Harris could get a promotion. Pam Lifford, Walter Hamada, head of DC Films. And then he goes on. He says, Jeff Johns. Jeff Johns would be ideal. Honestly, if Jeff Johns wanted to be publisher of DC Comics, that would be the best possible outcome for DC Comics and may actually buy them another 2 years worth of life. But Jeff Johns, I don't think he's interested. Jeff Johns was a friend of mine, and he used to tell me I'd say, you really seem like you're gunning for that EIC job, Jeff. And he'd go, Ethan, my ambitions are much bigger than that. He's like, I don't want to be editor-in-chief of DC Comics. And I couldn't think of anything bigger than that. But he has moved on to Hollywood, and he's making a lot more money, and he's got a lot more creative control, and I don't think he wants the job. I think any work that he does for DC, he does from his heart. I don't think he does it out of any obligation or any necessity. I don't think he's looking for that gig. It's a shame because he could do it. What about outside the publisher? Jeff Loeb, who was fired by Kevin Feige from Marvel. Jeff Loeb, not necessarily someone I really respect. I always see Jeff Loeb as just hanging on. He was always hanging on to people who were powerful, like laughing at their jokes too loud. I saw him hanging out with like Joss Whedon at San Diego Comic-Con, like, following him around, trying to get his attention. He's a social climber, and he's just not a very good writer. And then you've got Joe Quesada here. This is interesting. Here's where Rich Johnson wants to put the knife firmly in Dan DiDio's back. You understand, I told you the story about Dan DiDio saying we will never, ever, ever work with Marvel Comics as DC Comics because of Joe Quesada and his crude comments about our company. So we're never going to work with Marvel while Joe Quesada is still there. Here is Rich Johnson taking that knife and sticking it in Dan DiDio's back. He was waiting. Rich Johnson was waiting for Dan DiDio to be fired. He couldn't wait. He was always publishing stuff about him. He was always publishing blind items. He was trying to get him in trouble whenever he could. Knowing this, he publishes this interesting line. He says, there has even been some discussion as to whether Joe Quesada would jump Marvel to be a new publisher at DC. That's a crazy thought. Why nobody would ever... And then he says, maybe someone should actually ask him rather than just keep suggesting him in meetings. You understand? Now, Dan DiDio is going to hear that, and that is a gut punch for Dan DiDio. That is an absolute gut punch. And, of course, Rich Johnson, he knows that. That was aimed right at Dan DiDio's... right at his heart. And bullseye. And he says, but as things stand, there's no rush or urgency to make any changes right now. Yeah, why? There's only a big sucking vacuum where Dan DiDio used to be. And they're at C2E2 right now, which is where Dan DiDio would be in his glory, standing up there at these panel discussions and telling fans excitedly about the plans that DC Comics has in the near future. There's no reason, there's no rush to replace him just because AT&T is looking at DC Comics with a calculator right now, with an abacus, and trying to work out exactly why DC Comics is still a part of AT&T Time Warner. Why? No rush. Let's see by San Diego, he says. So he's saying we're going to see what happens in June or July of this year. And he says, here's how DC is set up at C2E2 right now. And I got to say, this is a sad display right here. This drawing of Wonder Woman is 4 years old. This is all reused art. This isn't even new current DC art. I don't know what's on the other two sides of this. Yeah, you've got, I don't know, you've got some stuff here, I guess. This is pathetic. This is unworthy of DC Comics, at least the DC Comics that I knew, that I worked at for 20 years. It is the end of the road. I wouldn't listen to what this guy says too much. I would kind of, read the tea leaves like everyone else is doing, and get yourself out of that funk of denial. Just accept that it's the end and party right now. Party like it's 1999, which was also, interestingly enough, the last time the comic book industry thought it was going to go under. And at that time, those comics were selling 10 times what they're selling now. So it really is time to close up shop. But thank you, everyone. Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed this content, first of all, leave me comments. I read all your comments. I think about them. I talk to my wife about some of your comments. I say, hey, this is interesting. What do you think of this? So your comments are really helpful and they're appreciated. Like this video, subscribe to this channel. That's the big thing. I need you guys to subscribe to the channel so that we can watch the decline of the comic book industry together. I will continue to make these videos, I don't know, with my kind of gallows humor, I guess. I mean, I don't know how I feel about any of this, honestly. I feel kind of like sad, I guess. A little morose about it, but it's going to happen no matter how I feel and how any of these people feel. So subscribe, like, share, leave comments, and I'll see you again soon with another video. Take care. Hey, you want to follow me on Twitter? Are you sure? Well, if so, I'm at Ethan Van Sciver. That's at Ethan Van Sciver. See you there. Hey, I got a P.O. box. Want to send me some mail? Send it to Ethan Van Sciver, P.O. Box 607, Marlton, New Jersey, 08053. And I'll probably open it up on a live stream. Thanks very much, everyone.